Yep, that's me collapsing at the finish line of the 2025 Toronto Waterfront Marathon. After an all-out sub 320 effort, my legs were just done. How did I get here? Well, stay tuned to find out. In this video, I'll be going over what training I did, a kilometer by kilometer race recap, as well as what goal time and race I'm thinking of next. This is the journey to the waterfront. Hey, welcome back, or if you're new here, my name is Eric. I'm a hobbyist runner from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I have aspirations of running in the Boston Marathon. At the start of this year, I set the goal of running a sub 3 marathon. I did some research, planning, and booked myself in for a checkup race in April, the Mississauga Half. And after running a miraculous 1:24:56, I was riding high. Full video on that up here or down in the description below. I was ready for my sub 3 coronation at my hometown marathon debut, and I thought maybe I'd even get that Boston qualifier time. Some of you might have noticed that 3:17:02 is not a sub 3 time, and you'd be correct. And the experienced runners among us might be wondering why I ran the full so slow if the half was relatively fast. Well, it happened in training. After running the half, I took about 9 weeks to rebuild my base to 100k per week to support the block to come. Aside from being mostly easy running, there were also some workouts, stuff like 10 by 400 meters or 10 by 800 meters to jumpstart the old engine after some time off. For tempo work, there's a classic 20-minute tempo run, but eventually that turned into 2 by 5k to really get myself ready. In terms of long runs, there's a tried and true long easy, so for me that'd be going out and running about 32.5 to 35 kilometers, just really getting that time on feet. But if you know me, you know I love integrating speed work into the back halves of these long runs to turn them into long run sessions. One of my favorite workouts is a 22k warm-up and then 8 by 3 minutes on at about threshold pace, and then 2 minutes off at about an easy jog. Or for more steady state effort, there's the same 22k warm-up and then followed by an 8k progression. That 8k progression would start about 20 seconds back from target marathon pace, and then work its way up about 10 or 15 seconds past that. For this marathon, I picked a 16-week plan loosely based on the Jack Daniels method of training. If you want the bi-weekly training vlogs, that's in the playlist here or down in the description. Otherwise, here's the TLDW. This plan ramped up from 80k to a peak of 130, and that's not unusual for me, but what was unusual was the addition of medium-long, kind of steady-paced or zone 3 efforts. But I thought with this plan's more incremental approach and the opening week's mileage being a bit lower than I'm used to, it'd be fine. And normally it might have been, but this summer was really hot and humid by Southern Ontario standards. The first 5 weeks were tough but manageable, but by week 6 I was really starting to feel the pain. A 2 by 5k session left me with a really sore hip, and by week 8 that developed into a full-blown hip flexor strain, and that left me unable to run. I booked a session with my PT and got to work healing. I would sporadically run throughout these few weeks, but they were always very easy efforts, and I just could not produce any power from my right side. Mentally, it didn't feel great. As easy as it would be to blame the heat and humidity, I don't think that was the only thing. My strength training routine really got exposed here because the plan proved my legs were not up for steady pace running, they were not strong and injury resistant enough for a sub 3 or faster time. As the weeks progressed in physio, I started to feel a lot better about my chances of running in October. I devised a 5-week plan for myself, starting from 85k, working to 130 plus a 2-week taper, and I'd also integrate weights into my strength training routine. This mini block really wasn't a pushover. As I was healing, I was adding more and more Ks, and in addition to that, during week 2, I got sick. So you can imagine, week 3, the 130k week, that was an all-out war. During the 2-week taper, I'd finally get some much needed rest, I'd heal up fully, kick the illness, and do some much needed sharpening. All said and done, I felt as ready as I could be for race day, but the question of a new goal time still remained. Throughout the mini block, the paces were such a moving target it made it really hard to predict. Using Runalyze though, I landed on the time of 3 hours and 20 minutes. Usually that would be a really safe bet given my PBs and training history, but after trying the 4:45 per kilometer pace in a few runs in the taper, it felt just about right. Race conditions were not ideal. The temperature was between 17 to 21 degrees Celsius, with winds coming from the south of 20 to 30 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 50. In terms of course, Toronto's not a hilly race by any means. There's only 4 major sections of elevation, and even then they're relatively mild. The only sections that really concern me would be this stretch of lakeshore right here, which would have no cover against the wind, and the final few hundred meters, which would be uphill on very tired legs. With all that in mind, the main strategy going in was just run to feel. If there was a section of road or a window of time where the winds weren't gusting, then that'd be a really good time to do a mini surge. Otherwise, hanging back a little and sticking around the goal pace would be the order of the day. I arrived at about 6:30 a.m., did my warm-up, and then headed to the corrals. Unfortunately, no plan survives first contact, and I didn't buffer enough time to use the washrooms. The crowds and the way the barricades were just set up made it nearly impossible. So I realized I would just have to go at the first one available on the race course, which would be about 3K. And as I was standing in the corrals, some doubts started to seep in. I started thinking of worst case scenarios like, what if my hip flexor gave out? That set me back months. What if my stamina just wasn't there? 5 weeks is not a lot of time. What the hell was I thinking? Funny enough, what stopped the spiraling was someone recognized me from these YouTube videos. Which is kinda mind-boggling because this channel has like 30 some odd subscribers and the most viewed video has like not even 1,000 views. But that definitely made my day, and I was mentally ready. I got the reset. I was ready to run this race with everything I had. At 8 a.m. we were off. I decided to run the first couple of Ks a little bit faster than usual because, well, I knew I was gonna stop at the 3K mark, so hey, why not? I hit up the porta potty at the 3K mark, and my reasoning for doing it here rather than later was because I hadn't really developed my momentum yet, so I thought that stopping here would be a lot easier as opposed to later on at say 15, 18, or 21K. All said and done, I had a deficit of 23 seconds and I would race that in the 4th and 5th kilometer. But then I started to notice my lap alerts from the Garmin and the course markers started to drift apart. So I knew I wasn't running the tangents 100% correctly. To give me a rough estimate of how far off I am, usually what I do is I count the actual seconds between when this sounds off and when I cross the actual physical marker. Running down Bathurst was one of those sections I mentally bookmarked because it is southbound and going right into the teeth of that wind, but for whatever reason, it just really didn't feel that bad. By the time we turned down the lakeshore, I realized I needed to do something about the heat. Thankfully, it was mostly cloudy, but I realized if the sun came out, I'd be toast. And man, I don't think I've ever splashed that much water over my head, nor have I ever drank that much sponsored electrolyte beverage in a single go. And Lakeshore West going eastbound was a really tough section because when you're downtown, you have buildings and stuff for cover, but here, you don't really have anything. And then the only real problem of this race happened. As I was running on Lakeshore underneath the Gardener, the Garmin GPS got really confused. Which, aside from making this reportable on Strava, it creates a bigger issue because now my little counting system is really far off. This thing started sounding off about 600-700 meters out from the actual kilometer markers, so now I was effectively flying blind. I had no idea how far behind I was. My objective now was to get in visual range of the 320 pace group. I knew they started about 2 or 3 minutes in front of me, so if I was about that far behind them, then I knew I was in a pretty good space. We then made our way eastbound and thankfully had some cover from some buildings, so that felt really nice. What didn't feel really nice was the Bayview bike path. I think there was a little uphill section of between 5 to 7% grade, which really wasn't that bad, but it did add about 5 seconds per kilometer to this lap right here. From there on, we headed down Eastern Avenue, made it right on Carlaw, and left on the lakeshore, where all the sound stages and movie studios were, and it was quite a sight to behold. Bit further down the street, I caught up to and even passed the 320 pace group. It wasn't all good news, because around the 25K mark, I started to feel a cramp coming onto my right calf. The heat was affecting me for sure because I remember at this point I was just wiping salt off of myself. And this is probably a little gross, but this is the armband for my heart rate monitor after the race. That white stuff is salt. From me. Yikes. In response to this, I shortened up my stride, increased the cadence, and that took the edge off. And maybe it was my lack of familiarity with the neighborhood, but the beaches just seemed to go on forever. Like, it felt like it was a good while before we hit that turnaround point on Queen and Balsam. But once I got there, it was a sense of relief. You know, I was over the wall, I didn't feel bad, and I was on the final 8K stretch. And as I was making my way back into town on Lakeshore, Carlaw, and then Eastern again, I started to realize for the final 4K, I felt really good. Which means I probably paced a little bit too conservatively, but I have to emphasize, we were taking casualties all race long. I saw people stretching out cramps, I saw people getting stretchered off. It was bad out there. But for me, I realized it was time for a little bit of cheeky negative split action. I flipped the switch, banged out a 428, 423, and 422, but I also got a critical moment of quiet. Up until this point, the winds and the crowds were so loud I just couldn't hear my own music, but now there was a critical moment of quiet, so I put on the song that was a closer in my playlist, One Final Effort from the Halo 3 soundtrack. It just seemed fitting, and if you're a Halo fan, you'll know that these piano chords are like electricity. I thundered down Wellington, made the turn on the bay, and realized this is it, the final ramp up to the finish. I smashed out a 4:11 kilometer and even touched my 10K race pace to launch myself across the finish line. I also did acknowledge the tribal chief as my celebration pose. It was a joke for some buddies I watch wrestling with, but I also noticed this dude right behind me looks so confused. Not that I blame him. As soon as I crossed the finish line, I had an unironic sense of pride and accomplishment. My one regret about my first marathon is that I always felt I ran it a little bit too conservatively. I didn't run to my limits, but that's not what happened today. I ran to my damn limits, and I got that confirmed because as soon as I crossed the finish line, the cramp in my right calf immediately intensified as soon as I stopped, and I fell flat on my butt in front of the cameras with dozens of people to see. But I have to say, this dude right behind me, he's a real one. He caught my head to make sure it didn't fall on the pavement. It wasn't really a real risk, but you know, the gesture is still incredibly kind. The medics were on me in seconds because I wasn't the first casualty of the day, and I don't think I was the last. And normally I'd refuse help and wait it out, but given how I was like literally feet from the finish line, I thought it'd be a better move to have them help me get out of there so I wasn't in the way. They got me out of there on a wheelchair, I collected my medal, and after a couple hundred meters or so, we tested my leg and I was good to go, so I got out of there on my own power. This result was a bit of a mixed bag. Although I'm super proud of running this PB given the conditions, I still know I'm capable of a lot better. Today's October 26th, exactly 1 week after the race. And in this 1 week, I've made my peace with the situation and I've realized that this was a very valuable learning experience. If the Mississauga half taught me how to be brave and daring and go after those big goals, then the Toronto Waterfront Marathon taught me mental resilience. With that in mind and the practical lessons on training, I know I'm ready for the next one. It's just a matter of where's next. But for now, if you've made it this far into the video, consider giving it a like, best way to support the channel. If you want to see how I'm getting on with training, hit subscribe. Also, were you there on race day, or did you run another race? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.